Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. This month we're doing something that we usually do in April, and we're talking about comedy movies, as a little April Fool's gift for you all. Instead of pulling a prank on you, we're going to gift you with our reviews of some comedy movies maybe you want to go and check out. So I believe this is going to be our first one. We're doing a bunch of Mel Brooks movies this year, and we're going to start off with Young Frankenstein. I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Joe Soria.
It's Frankenstein.
And Christopher Morgan.
Ovaltine.
Ovaltine. Yeah. So let's go for a little roll in the hay over here and talk Young Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, if you will. Chris, do you want to do the plot? Kick us off.
I shall. The story, it starts with Frederick Frankenstein, played by Gene Wilder. He's teaching a class.
Not Frederick.
And I'm going to be quick on this because I could laugh my way through this. Somebody from Transylvania comes in and gives him a box of his grandfather or great-grandfather. They keep fluctuating between his grandfather and great-grandfather. A box with that sets the ball rolling about like his work, because up till now he changed the pronunciation of his name from Frankenstein to Frankenstein, because he thought his grandfather or great-grandfather was a lunatic. So they go to Transylvania and he meets Igor, played by Marty Feldman, and Inga, his assistant, played by Terry Garr. And then they go to the castle, and we meet Frau Brucher, played by the late, great, unfortunately most of this cast is late, great. Oh, Christ, all of a sudden
Horace Leachman.
And Frederick Frankenstein discovers the secret of his grandfather's work, finds a secret library, secret lab, and he and Igor go and find a body of a man who is just hanged, played by Peter Boyle. And then Frankenstein tasks Igor to go get a brain. Hans Delbruck, saint and scientist, is the labeling on the brain at the brain depot. The brain depot where you can after 5 o'clock you slide the brains in. Anyway, he breaks it and picks up an abnormal brain.
Abby normal.
And resurrects this thing. Madeleine Cotton plays his fiance, who then shows up. The monster runs amok, runs into Gene Hackman, played by a blind old man.
The opposite, I believe it's a blind old man played by Gene Hackman.
Sorry, yeah. Blind old man played by Gene Hackman. I am doing my best not to go into the details and laugh at every little thing. You have to understand, Beth had never seen the whole thing all the way through. So as we're building up to watch it, I'm laughing at things that aren't going to come on for another 15 minutes. So anyway.
Sounds like my family watching this.
Yeah. Long story short, they get the monster back. Frankenstein, but he gives part of his intellect to him, so Peter Boyle can be a normal law-abiding citizen, and he marries Madeleine Cotton, who gives him 2 hampers, one for his shirts and one for his socks and poo-poo undies. And then Frankenstein marries Inga, and that is the end of our story. There are 1 or 2 things where I feel like the pacing, there's a lull in pacing, but rewatching it for the umpteenth time, I realized that was the pacing does lull for a little bit, but it's a lot shorter than I thought it was. I fucking love this movie. And to be honest with you, if you watch Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, there's a lot more Bride of Frankenstein than there is Frankenstein. And the only reason I know this is because when I actually saw Bride of Frankenstein for the first time, it ruined the film for me because I was like, oh, that's where they got this from for Young Frankenstein. So it's one of those things where at the end of the day, it would probably come out to be a 2.5. So I'm looking at a 3 right now. Because as I said, if it weren't a binary scale, it would probably give it a 2.5. But the truth of the matter is, I fucking love this movie. It is my number 1 comedy. It is one of my favorite films. And, there's shades of Ingmar Bergman in here. There's a lot of, you could tell who they were influenced by a lot, not just from this genre. So unless anybody can convince me to knock it down to a 2, I'm going to go with the 3 so far on this.
I am probably going to give this a 2. I also like this movie quite a bit, but there are certainly points of it where the joke tramples all over the plot. I guess I could say. And look, I love all the jokes, but certainly there are points where it's like, all right, this joke is not to progress the plot; it's just to be a Mel Brooks joke, which is always good, but not a useful part of the plot, I would say. For the most part, I think it's a fine story. It borrows a lot from Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, as you said. And it's just the precursor to, like movies like Naked Gun or Scary Movie, but not quite in that same vein, I guess. But it does have that, messing with the tropes of the previous types of genres and movies that it's lampooning here. I think it does a pretty good job with that, especially in terms of messing with kind of how the Universal monster movies were shot and the more ridiculous parts of them, like making fun of those. So in terms of that, I think it's just fine, but it's not really a 3 for me. So I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah, I think the 2 is about right. I think it's more of like the original parody, and you've seen so many of these probably, and I'm the lone person here who had not seen. I've definitely seen pieces of this. I've heard millions of references. I've watched other Mel Brooks movies. I've grown up with family members quoting these movies, but I have not seen this movie definitely all the way through, and it feels a bit. It's hard because you're like, I've seen all this movie in 30 different ways, so in 30 different places. But if you give it that kind of timestamp of it's the original parody, it's not the original farce, but it's a classic farce that's a parody that takes it to the next level and kind of builds on it. It becomes almost like, I don't think it's improv. I think it's actually planned mostly, but it's very improvisational and like back and forth where they're like saying the same word over and over again. Like you say yes or and no and then, so it has that, and it has this kind of hot spit take, performances where they come in and out and kind of take over the movie, and you have these little segments that are owned by different people, but the main through line. So it's not the best plot ever. It's not original. It's more of a takeoff, a send off. So it's a mid-level 2. Not much else to expound on that.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm still back and forth on a 2 or 3, but then I think of things that are, one of the things I like about it are all the little subtle things. And it's so funny because at the beginning, Cloris Leachman has a little small candelabra and the candles are lit. And halfway up the stairs, she goes, keep close to the candles. And right then, Beth started laughing. She goes, oh, fuck, the candles aren't lit. It's one of those things where there's like a lot of little things in here because, I don't know, I'm kind of back and forth. I'm gonna keep this hemming and hawing about a 2 or 3.
Is that on a script level? I guess to me those are like the jokes. So to me, you're giving it like narrative on the jokes that are happening within it. I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right.
That's not to like.
I'll
ruin
stick with
your
a strong 2 then. Let's be fair. I'll stick with a strong 2.
Okay. Yeah,
because this is one of those things where
style,
you're right. The style's kind of bleeding in a little bit.
And dialogue for sure.
Yeah. Like a little, yeah.
All right, so that's 2s all around for that. Sounds like Joe. Why don't you talk to us about the themes?
Yeah, the themes are resurrection. I mean, it's a comedy. It is Easter. It's Good Friday, Easter weekend. So they're rising from the dead. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a comedy of, if you know the story of Frankenstein. It's the same plot points as Frankenstein, just funnier. I think there's the addition of not wanting to live in the shadow of, family and setting your own path. That's pretty much that and making choices. I think that, the differences of the women that he kind of goes for. It's like settling versus kind of pushing forward and, finding true north, true love, what makes your, passion. Like he's a teacher and at the end, he's a scientist. I think a lot of teachers want to be doers, right? And so you have him being a teacher and with this fiance who they're having that like, I'm like, oh, this is going to set the whole movie, this kissy face. Like, it's funny, but you're like, this is how this movie's going to be. You could feel it where they're like, oh my God, it's going to be great. And they're like not kissing, oh, the lips and everything. You can't touch his fingers. So, themes, and again, nothing super long, mid-level one for Frankenstein's themes in general, and I think like the horrors and the tropes, I'm going to take that part of those pieces of the plot narrative and just be like, hey, there's good thematic elements and they do develop and they are very important. Anger management, that's a big one. I don't know when we'll get to that point, but I've never seen more yelling. It made me think of Anchorman, like, the loud noises line. I was like, is Brick Tamlin going to come here and just yell it like loud? Like Gene Wilder really just goes loud. I've never kind of seen that in a movie before. So, again, not the strongest one, but a one nonetheless.
Yeah, he really is completely overacting this whole thing, which I guess you could take as, I don't know, you could see it as funny or whatever, but you're absolutely right. This has all of the themes of Frankenstein, the science versus superstition themes, the, man versus monster, like what makes a man or what makes a monster or whatever. But also, as you mentioned, that destiny theme for Frederick, and it is like I think it's well done enough for like a comedy movie. I think putting themes together in these silly ass movies is something that Mel Brooks is actually pretty good at over like a lot of other movies like that are just send ups. I think that these have a little bit of a stronger like connective tissue between the introduction of a theme and then the conclusion or like the resolution of it. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
Well, it has that heart and it has the fear of the other scenario, right? The one thing like Mel Brooks always has, even if it's like the silliest of silly, there is a lot of heart in the movie, and that's shines through. So,
actually, I was going to bring that up because aside from like destiny and self-determination, this film doesn't have a lot of heart. I mean, you forget about the little subtle things about how he goes from the creator thing, where like this is my creation, to the fatherly thing, to the point where he actually realizes that he created something that he's got to take care of and has to risk his entirety and sacrifice maybe part of himself so that he takes responsibility for this life he has brought into the world. And actually, to be honest with you, for the first time, well, not for the first time, but that really came into focus for me when I rewatched it last night. So actually the themes are quite good. Aside from all the other things, I really like that aspect where you take responsibility, where you move past the whole, okay, this is my creation, to the fact that, holy shit, I created something. Oh my God, I love this thing. I love this person. And what are you willing to do to sacrifice this? So I'm actually going to give it a pretty decent 1.
Okay.
Is it sacrifice, or does he just want the Schwarzenhog or whatever they refer to? The Schinken Dog, whatever.
Ron Stucker. Is that what? Yeah.
There are about 40 different references of reference of penises in this movie without even getting close to what they could called. So
woof.
It goes without saying. All right, so that's one's all around for themes. And that's going to bring it to antagonists, and I'm going to talk about that. So this is an interesting question, right? I guess, and on one level, it could be like the townspeople or the sheriff or whatever he's supposed to be, lieutenant or whatever, the cop that is kind of the personification of how all the townspeople. Or actually, he's kind of splits the difference because he's trying to stop riots from happening, but also. He wants to bring all the concerns of the town to Doc Frankenstein. Or, is it the worry or is it like fight against destiny? Is like destiny the antagonist in this? I think it's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm like fully, I don't know if I fully want to give that points, but I think that I think those things are both there. That being pointed out, I want to hear what you guys have to say before I make up my mind on this one. So go ahead.
I kind of actually, be honest with you, I got a lot of the internal struggle. I mean, to be honest, it's amazing how empathetic I found Frankenstein. I hadn't seen this in a while. And I quote it all the fucking time. Watching this last night, Beth's like, you bring this up all the time. I'm like, yeah, because I love Ovaltine. Every time I'm like Ovaltine and, Footsteps. But what I really forgot was like part and parcel to what I was saying with themes is there was a lot of internal struggle. I mean, not just like man versus nature and man versus monster, but it's a lot of man versus the unknown, but it's also one's own self-doubt. I mean, to be honest with you, I was surprised about Frankenstein's character arc. It's there. And he does internally go through a lot. I mean, given that it is a comedy, it's not given the gravitas maybe it would be if it were a serious drama, but it was fucking there more than I remembered it being there. So this is one of the things that like Scott and I would always like said, this is more of a nebulous thematic kind of antagonist, but it's definitely there. I think it's enough to garner a 1 from me because it wasn't just about destiny. It's about, self-doubt. It's about, not just self-determination. It's about self-doubt. It's about, what are you willing to overcome, whether it's ego or whether it's your desire to be a better person or whatever, all the above. So Frankenstein is actually more of a dynamic character that I actually remembered. And I think Gene Wilder does a great job with it. So I'm going to say it's enough there to give Antagonist a 1.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I don't know, it's either unclear or it's everybody. So, you could say it's the fiance at one point and the Blucher or himself or, everyone but his assistant or Nazism or whatever the fake German Nazism that goes on throughout the movie, detractors in general. I think we've done this a couple of times, but to me, it's like, I think the antagonist here is a 0 and the protagonist, you were just referring to it, is pretty much the strong one. So I'm going to go 0 on the antagonist then and leave it to the protagonist, who's the dual-sided, Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and not say, he gets both points because he's two people. So.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna agree with Joe. I see your points, Chris, but I don't see that as, I see that as more points towards protagonist, like you said, Joe, than towards antagonist for me. But not taking away from your argument. 1 for you as of now, unless you want to change it.
Let me. You guys brought up some good points. This is a weird thing. I'm gonna stick with the 1 for now. I will, once we get done with protagonist, let's see how much I add to it.
Okay. Well, talk about protagonist then.
Okay. So I think Frankenstein is a great protagonist. I mean, not only is it's one of these things where he's not an entirely fish out of water, but they do enough to establish his biases at the beginning, or biases against. But he really does kind of, you could tell it's kind of a begrudging resentment towards his grandfather or great grandfather. Because he doesn't take any convincing. I mean, it might have been a matter of the fact that it's a comedy and there's a pacing aspect to it. But he is a really good protagonist, because once he gets to Transylvania, it's kind of like there's like he starts at A and there's a C part where, he gets to his grandpa's research, and it's getting there. And to get there, you have different people fill in the pieces to it, whether it's Igor, to a certain degree, Inga. You have Frau Brucher, which we'll get to later. So he did. I don't really know to what extent if this is really a hero's journey or not, but he is a good protagonist in that he knows just enough to keep him going, and to actually, he has a purpose to this mystery on a few different levels. And then he does discover that his affection for the creature goes from, like I said, being the love of a creation to actually caring about this. So he's a solid protagonist. I'm going to give him a 1, and I'm going to go back and give Antagonist a 0, because I already kind of said a lot what I was going to say before. I'm like, yeah, you guys are right. So yeah, I'm going to give him 1.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of it. I think we want to, actually say Gene Wilder. I mean, it's crazy. You look at his career, and I remember when I was a kid, it's just like Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka, he's Willy Wonka, and Willy Wonka was a bomb, and he has he was in Blazing Saddles before this, a little bit Bonnie and Clyde, but otherwise he's really nothing. This is kind of a star-making performance at, he's 41 years old at this point. The star of this movie is probably Gene Wilder's hair, which is literally the most insane hair. I don't know what it's made out of. It looks like clay. Yeah, it looks like, I don't know what it is, but it's just like thick and lustrous and crazy town. But it has like a character of its own. His face, like even in the back of Steve's photo, just like you would see, there's just like, he's so committed to this movie. This movie, I did a lot of research because I was watching this movie, and I'm just like, this isn't the funniest movie I've ever. I don't get the comedy part of this. Maybe I'm missing something. And you just see that, like, this was his baby, and he came to Mel Brooks. He's like, I wanted this movie to be kind of a serious farce where it's like, it has merit and it is a real movie, but it also has comedy. It's not just like joke, and it does have joke after joke. It's in there, but it's still based on him being very self-important, right? And gravitas, like he's like an actor, like a Yale stage actor that's coming in and living with the riffraff, and that's what the movie kind of exudes, and he exudes it, and the yelling, like we said. To me, Gene Wilder, like Willy Wonka, you watch Willy Wonka now, you're like, that movie wasn't popular. That movie is, I don't know, like Gene Wilder in that movie and this movie is just like a tour de force. And then he goes on and does all the Richard Pryor movies and all the other things that, I grew up on. But yeah, this is a very strong one, and probably the strongest part of this movie. Obviously, again, the titular young Frankenstein usually leans into it being a pretty strong part of the movie. So strong one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Chris, you said a lot earlier about how he has like this full arc, and I absolutely agree with that. That's kind of a lot of what I was going to talk about here is, and Joe, you're right. Wilder does just an amazing job as this guy. But from start to finish, he's like a completely different person, and it makes that change in a lot of little ways throughout, even though there is that, like, the moment that he flips that switch when they find the laboratory, and it's like, sends out a bunch of sparks, and then he flips it again. It's like that was the switch flipping in his head, that he's like becoming, Frankenstein from Frankenstein, Frankenstein from Frankenstein. And yeah, I think that this movie does a really good job with that. It's interesting that you point that out, Joe, that he wanted to kind of play this not like a complete joke, like not like a complete farce, but like as a, you know, he's almost like, I guess, the straight man in this, and everybody else is like kind of acting silly as hell all around him. And you know, he obviously does them. Like one of my favorite scenes is when he stabs himself in the leg with the scalpel, like right in the beginning, and then he just like tries to pretend that he didn't do it. Like puts his like crosses his legs to like cover it up in front of all his students and stuff. Like he's got a lot of moments like that, but for sure you see a lot inside of what this character's feeling and what he's experiencing. And I like, it's something that you don't see a lot, especially in movies that are this heavy on the comedy, right? So I really love this character. Like I said, I've loved this movie for a really long time. And you're right, Chris. He does have a lot of layers to him. So I'm going to give it a 1.
It's important too that he's a family. He's trying to. That's the key to the whole movie, right? And I think that was the key to the idea when I looked at it. You know, it's like, what if your family is kind of a joke and you want to separate from it? And so he doesn't want to be funny because his family's kind of being laughed at and the name. So he didn't let go. Some people would, change their name, right? He didn't change the name. He just changed the pronunciation of his name. So it's like, it's still the same. If you wrote it down, you can't pronounce it differently when it's written, right? So that's like kind of the joke where no matter what, if he was coming into the room, he'd be like, oh, that's Frankenstein or Frankenstein, whatever it is. It's still, it's kind of a deep level of family embarrassment, and that he has to go straight. And then he kind of, as he becomes the mad scientist, he also gets to have a little more fun with Inga and Igor. He doesn't become the serious. He gets to like open up, and that's part of it, his like release. So yeah. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I want to circle back to. I mean, I just want to acknowledge what you said about Gene Wilder's performance, because I am watching this, watching this in an early age and I went to see, we'll get to Blazing Saddles when we get there, but I saw it my parents for some reason took me to see Blazing Saddles when I was 6. I have a Blazing Saddles story, which I'll save till then.
I've never seen Blazing Saddles either, by the way. So
those two movies came out the same year, by the way.
So I saw these both at a young age. So they set this standard for comedies really, really high for me. And not only is this a really well-rounded character, but Joe, it's like you said, I mean, this is a fucking tour de force performance by Gene Wilder. And I think that, I didn't acknowledge that. So
even that dance sequence, like that's like the Willy Wonka gets to dance, but like the putting on the Ritz scene, I mean, you just see him like full bore commit. And like, yeah, obviously the Peter Boyle is like a silly version of it, but you see him, he's really wants it. He wants to win. He wants to be like, look at my monster, but this is my proof. It's he's all in on it. Like, redeeming the family name in essence, and his grandfather's work, right? He's so shamed, but he's looking for that library full. Like, that's the whole point. He's like, well, I'm looking for the secret library, not the upstairs library. I want the downstairs library with all the secrets, because I just want to redeem this. So I mean, and you can feel it. It looks like it's kind of a redemption story for him, because if you're 41, you've been trying to make movies and be a film star, and you haven't, and this is it. You've got only so many shots.
Yeah, and I do like that he was expecting an actual library, and it's this like ratty little bookshelf with some dust-covered books on it. No, it's a great subversion of expectations.
And speaking of that, Gene Wilder really broke out this year because he was in 5 movies in 1974. So well done, Gene. All right. Well, that sounds like it's going to be ones all around for a Protagonist. So, Joe, why don't you talk to us about the supporting characters?
Woo. I mean, I think this is oftentimes, from the Mel Brooks movies I've seen, it's a heat check movie. He does it all the time. And it's just like nonstop. Like, you've got these people come in and they just come in hot. And they don't fuck around. The supporting here they're not a waste of time for the most part. Everyone on the screen behind you, everyone we listed, Gene Hackman's in the one scene. Like, everyone gets a moment to shine, and they elevate the protagonist, which is the essence of all of this. You have Peter Boyle in again also I think they said Peter Boyle and Marty Feldman were not very famous. They were basically put in this movie because Gene Wilder they had the same agent as Gene Wilder, and that's why they're in this movie. You have
Worked out for them.
Cloris Leachman, playing this standard, but like it still has this great humor of like the evil Frau. I really, I don't remember ever seeing. I've seen Terry Garr, in the later years, and I'm like, I don't even know who Terry Garr is. I just always hear her name. I knew who she is. She is great in this movie, and she's like, it's not a pure ditz, it's a half ditz because she's a laboratory agent. It's just the way her voice and the way she looks, and because she starts as the role in the Hey Lady that you're like she's a ditz, but it's not true. She's just kind of like the old time version of black and white pixie manic dream girl almost. Like where she's like smart and she's a scientist. Like, why is she there? I'm not sure. She's an assistant to laboratory people. Like, why is she in the cart? She's gonna be your assistant. Okay, whatever. We're not gonna go too deep into this. But she's not like dumb or breaking stuff or tripping. She's actually nurturing him and like getting him back. It's like almost like a nurse, like nursing back his soul to health. So really strong. Peter Boyle, like we said, Quiet Time. I forgot the name of the cop. I'd say that was kind of the silliest, like most stodgy old style with the, the moving of the arms, but it's still there. And I think it all felt where it's, this movie's filmed in 1974, and maybe I don't want to get into the style with the black and white too much, but it still exuded out of that, where this could have been filmed in the 1930s. It could have been filmed in the 1970s. It could have been filmed later. And all the performances were not, they felt, realistic, like not realistic, but just not stodgy or like aged, or they didn't age poorly. So everyone, it's all around strongest one, as oftentimes in Mel Brooks movie for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. The performances, I think that's, I agree with what you just said there, where you said they weren't stodgy, or, the performances did feel like they were kind of rooted in those old movies, right? But like they didn't feel like the wooden acting of those old movies, right? And it felt like every supporting character, like a lot of times it feels in Mel Brooks movies, was having a blast doing it as well. Like, I felt like Mel Brooks was like, all right, go as wild as you fucking want. Like, we're going to do this scene as over the top as we can do it. And just, So like you mentioned most of them, Marty Feldman as Igor was like kind of stand out to me. The character that I always remembered, like the scene where it's actually the scene I was just talking about, where he throws the switch and then the sparks fly out, and Gene Wilder yells, "Damn your eyes!" and you just like severe close up on him, and he goes, "Too late," and it's the Marty Feldman look on his face. But the cop was Inspector Kemp, played by Kenneth Mars, and there's a bunch of townspeople and things, but I think you mentioned most of the supporting characters. I couldn't agree with you more on all that stuff, and I'll leave the rest up to you, Chris.
Yeah, this reviews a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because I came into it thinking I was going to give it a 10, and I'm looking at an 8. But I realized like maybe there's parts that we're deducting, but that's only because the other parts are so much stronger, and everybody gives a layered performance in this. And you guys didn't mention Madeleine Cotton. I'll get back to her in a second, because Terry Garr does a German light accent, but it never cracks. From somebody who, let's face facts, her career is mostly supporting roles. And to be honest with you, she was on an episode of Star Trek that was intended to be a backdoor pilot, and she had such a miserable experience on that, she almost quit acting in like 1968 or whatever. I love Star Trek, but that has happened a couple times where people had a mirror. So you have somebody, and she just gives such a great performance, and it's never over the top. Her accent's not overdone. I mean, a lot of these performances, especially the women, Terry Garr, Cloris Leachman, Madeleine Cotton, don't really ham up their performances that you have usually seen. And maybe Madeleine Cotton's the most, I don't want to say over the top.
I think they're all pretty hammy, but like not in a bad
what
way.
I'm saying is it could have been, they could have been much more, because even Madeleine Cotton is the most over the top, but it's like she is vain, but they do this thing where she's like, oh, my nails, like when she's trying to give her kid, it's like there's all she is doing is going to a party, and it's just like, this is the way this person is every single day. So then you have a part where like they're leaving, and all of a sudden this is a little more intense than normal, than they would normally be if they were going to go out. So he's expecting some kind of little, I'm not going to see you for a while. And she's like, yeah, but this is kind of like just another social event, but she's got to look perfect. And everybody but that's what I'm saying is like every performance is so layered, and I don't think I appreciated it, as much until, it's probably been 10 years since I've seen this, and I still remember it. And, I've been laughing a lot at this, and I love this movie, and listening to you guys talk about certain things, especially Joe, this is like the first time Beth, where you both had seen it through for the first time. I'm learning a new appreciation for it that I either forgot or taken for granted. So it's getting a very strong one, but I'm just, it's just marvelous. All these performances are just absolutely marvelous.
Yeah, I left Madeleine Cotton on the table, and then I was thinking I should mention her. I think it's actually the most one note of all the characters, probably, in a way, because it's kind of like 50s movie actress or 30s movie star, where it's like, yes, darling, but like it's the darling character, but it gets played up, and they get to play off of each other, where it like elevates it. And when he comes back, the best part is the first time they're so in love, the second time it's so the opposite. So it is, and then the way the turn that she gets to be Frankenstein, the monster's wife, and basically like that's the switch. That's totally unexpected. I think that's kind of a funny opposite twist. So I mean, from that, and I think when I was listening, I didn't listen too much, but I flicked on the Mel Brooks track on mine, the collection on the DVD, and I happened to flick it on the scene where Madeleine Cotton comes the second time. And he talked about how it was almost impossible to film the scene, and almost the entire movie, how Gene Wilder couldn't stop cracking up every scene, but especially that scene where it's kind of everyone's finally in the same room. Most of these scenes, everyone's kind of like there's pieces of it, 3 of them, 2 of them, 4 of them. That one you have everybody, because she comes in and you have Igor on like hot, like doing all the sex talk, and like if you need help with the ladies, like it's literally like boom, boom, boom. And they had to cut around so much stuff so they could get like the scenes, because they loved it so much. You can see that everyone is enjoying this movie and being in it and being in the presence of the other people and letting other people shine. So, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of almost a dream scenario. And it's a kind of movie that really just, let Mel Brooks keep, obviously he had other movies that were popular, but, this movie could have been, a big flop failure for the black and white side, for some other options, for being like a dated story. And it actually, I think it, did it. I think that they actually had to go for a lower, amount. They switched, I think they switched studios because they wouldn't get enough money. And it ended up, I think it was a $1.7 million or $1.8 million budget, made $90 million. So, I mean, that's like, 30x, 40x almost. Maybe my math is wrong, actually. It's even more than that. But whatever it is, that's mega. So this is the kind of movie that lets everyone skyrocket. And I feel like, Peter Boyle, who has basically no role and has no career before this, he's in Where the Buffaloes Roam after this, which is a personal favorite of mine. Obviously, everybody loves Raymond, but he has this like crazy cool career. Didn't we just watch a movie where he's in it? Or I just watched Taxi Driver. He's in Taxi Driver,
Oh, shit.
As the other taxi driver. Like, you just forget because he doesn't speak and he just grunts, but it's a different type of thankless role, but also it allowed him to stand out in a different way. So, this to me is like probably outside of some of the style stuff is the strongest part of this movie. There's Protagonist and the performances of this in general, and the supporting are top notch.
And that's, I think, Joe, that's what I was thinking about, like with these performances, like Madeleine Cotton, she is a very superficial character, and the superficiality of their relationship, her and Frankenstein, they're done, that what they both want out of life, the depth and shallowness of it, but the restraint, because Madeleine Cotton did very little actually, and is not compared to everybody else, doesn't have as much screen time, and it would have been very easy for her to. She did a lot with very little, and she only needed to do a very little because Anyway, sorry.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean those are all very good points. It sounds like we're all gonna give ones to supporting, and we're gonna move on to dialogue. And I've got the dialogue. So it's a Mel Brooks movie. Gene Wilder. I think it was co-written Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder. And yeah, I mean it's if you like Mel Brooks jokes, it's got those and a lot of them. And not only that, but I think the actual dialogue between characters is very well done. As I think a lot of times in Mel Brooks movies, you'll find like when they're not straight up making like dumb jokes, they're actually having pretty decent conversations outside of that. Obviously the language leans towards finding jokes within it, either wordplay or just kind of just acting like silly as hell. But I think that the dialogue really is good. And, at this point, a lot of what makes this movie hold up, I think, is the fact that you remember we've quoted, 15, 20 jokes from the movie already at this point in the course of this review. So you remember, like, this is one of those movies where you just remember a lot of the jokes from it. Especially if, like me and Chris, you've seen it a bunch of times. But Joe, I think you probably feel somewhat the same way, where it's like a lot of it's pretty, you've probably heard a lot of these jokes, even though you haven't seen the movie. So like, it's something that stands up. It's like, when Chappelle's Show came out and when we were in college, Joe, it was, like, it was something like that where everybody was talking. It was like, quoting those jokes.
Little John.
Yeah. What did the five fingers say to the face? All that stuff. But like, yeah, I think that was similar to like what it must have been like to, be around when this movie came out in 1974. So, there's no way I could give dialogue a 0 in terms of that. I've been hearing this dialogue my whole life and laughing at it. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah. And also, let me just go real quick, Chris, because this one I'm not, but it's fast paced, triple entendre, very funny. We've been talking about it a lot. I will give a shout out to one other thing I think I listened to or read was that the final line, that most of it was written, but the final line by Gene Hackman was improv, and because they laughed so hard and the crew laughed so hard that he kept it in. I was going to make espresso, I believe is the line, or I want to make I was just about to make espresso. Yeah, Gene Hackman comedy roles. I just watched Royal Tenenbaums, and I have to say the man didn't do enough comedies, and when he did, some of them were schlocky, but this is like it's so awesome to see him get to do like a different type of than the standard hot Gene Hackman, and kind of I kind of was thinking about how Gene Wilder and Gene Hackman are kind of opposite sides, where Gene Wilder always has to play zany but funny, and Gene Hackman always has to play zany but angry and ragey and like a little bit off kilter. So you see them both in this movie. They're not even the same scene, but it's just kind of a cool little thing. So yeah, a good one for me as well. Go ahead, Chris.
As I said before, I integrate the dialogue into my everyday conversation, to the point like my friend Jen and I, we've both seen this so many times that like when we say like instead of saying like "G'nate," or like we sign off in an email, it's like "Taffeta."
Taffeta, darling.
Taffeta, darling. You sweetie. Yeah, like I said, without even thinking about it, like there's this is part of my daily. The dialogue in this is integrated into my daily life, so I'm giving it a 1.
Nice. All right, 1's all around dialogue, and Chris, keep on keeping on with style.
I don't even know where to begin. The style in this is incredible. I mean, it pays homage to the Universal horror films, and to be honest with you, the street scene where the riot gathers is the same set that was used for all the Universal horror films. I mean, it's used like anything that's filmed in California where you need France or Austria or anything that's got cobblestone, they're going to have that three-way intersection. Marty Feldman's character obviously is definitely somehow Bergman-esque in everything in his whole design, except in a very zany way. I love everything about the style of this film. And as I said before, I could really sit here and dissect it. But I'm just going to give it a really super strong one. We've talked about so much stuff, and everything plays in the style in one point or another. So yeah, I'm just going to give it a very strong one.
Yeah, and I get same. We talked about the black and white, and it actually is done so well that, and I think that's a big thing because this was the time where you really, was turned out against, and you have that. You have just how seminal it is in general, and there's a reason. I think we missed on the quotes and everything else. The "Walk This Way" story, how this was the inspiration for the song "Walk This Way" by Aerosmith.
I did really.
Literally, they saw this movie and then they wrote "Walk This Way." So, I mean, not that that's the craziest thing ever, but it's just there's so much that it's like infused in culture that the style. This is like the setting for any time you want to make an old style movie, or when they made Spy Hard? Not Spy Hard? What's the one where Leslie Nielsen plays Dracula? Something like that, where it's the predecessor for it, but it never is never going to be done better, in essence, visually. And I think it was also to showcase that Mel Brooks could make kind of a beautiful looking movie here. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about, and because that's actually one of a lot of these, comedies these days are kind of made on a quick and easy, and there's not really much style to it. I don't want to defame people, but their names are Schmad and Blandler, and they're also Jewish. But, they make movies that are just, the cookie cutter, not with style, not with panache, not with like pure effort. It's for fun, and this movie's for fun, but also for real. Like there's heart in every moment of it. So yeah, strong one on style for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. We talked about it a couple times, but like you can look at the picture behind me if you're watching this and see how, like, it's black and white, yeah, but it's so well lit. Like so many times you'll see black and white movies where you can't tell what things are, they're in too deep a shadow. I feel like Brooks and whoever his cinematographer were just really nailing like every shot, the way they lit it. And I'm not sure what colors they had the actors wearing, but it really showed up nicely in the black and white. I also want to give points to the score. I thought was really good, really well done. And they have like a little overture right in the beginning, and it's freaking amazing. Like it's really good. Just very good orchestral score. And and just it's a Mel Brooks comedy, so you got you feel his style of jokes in this like kind of beautiful and like movie that has a lot going on, as we've mentioned, like somewhat thematically, somewhat like it's trying different things, and it's trying to build these character arcs through while at the same time slapping out a joke every 7 seconds. Kind of reminiscent of like early Groening stuff in terms of comedy style. I feel like Groening was like a big Mel Brooks fan because everything you watch by like early Simpsons and Futurama, it's like every 6 or 7 seconds it's a joke, but they really like cranked out good plots and stories in those shows as well, especially Futurama, I think. But yeah, so it's all that. The style is great. We're doing 4 Mel Brooks movies this month. I don't expect I'm going to give a 0 style on any of them, even though one that I haven't seen yet. And yeah, it's a 1 for style for me.
And I think I want to say one more thing. I mean, aside from the fact that they really captured the old movies in which the sound wasn't perfect, there's always that little raspy kind of thing. I want to point out that unless, Joe, I'm missing something, this was actually shot in black and white, Because nowadays you'd shoot it in color and you'd account for the fact that you're going to put a black and white filter on it because a lot of stuff's shot digitally. You know, this thing it's pristine. It looks beautiful, and it was actually shot in black and white on film. Yeah. And you know, we've all said it, and I wanted to stress again. So
yeah, and it's Gerald Hirschfeld, who I'm not familiar with. As at least in Failsafe, a couple other movies, but it's definitely it's definitely pristine. I watched the I know it's on Hulu, but I watched the Blu-ray version, and it was just like, it really was very, very crisp all throughout, and kind of immaculate in that way. And I don't know if that's just restoration or whatever else, but it really was pristine. So
yeah, you did mention Bergman a couple times, Chris, and I do agree. I think it looks a lot in certain places like a Bergman movie.
It has a Murnau touch too, or like just in general, like that. You know, anyone who did any Dracula-y type, you know, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari type vibe in it for sure.
Yeah. All right, so that's ones for style, and then recommend. Joe, do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, when I watched the movie and when I was finished with it, I was just like, you know, this movie, we talked through a lot of it and why we enjoyed it, and I was just like, this movie isn't funny. I wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. I guess I was expecting more, and then I did, like I said, I did some feedback, and I kind of what I expected. I said, this is supposed to be kind of real in essence. This isn't, and everyone admitted. Mel Brooks said, this is might be my best movie. It is not my funniest movie. And I think Gene Wilder had the same thing. So if you're going and you want to look for this like laugh a minute and you're looking for like obvious jokes, this might not be the top shelf choice for you in the oeuvre of Mel Brooks. I think this is almost the most subtle, and you need to have a basis in some of the historical. Otherwise, this movie is going to be honestly really, really boring. I just don't want anyone to go in and watch a movie that's like based on movies from the 30s and then not have seen any of them or know any of the references and then enjoy, you know, kind of like sleep through it. So if you are someone who at least has some basis or interest in film history and can give it some context, this is a good recommendation. If you're probably just looking for like right out of the box comedy first Mel Brooks, I don't know if this is the best option to start. That would be my thoughts. So one on a recommendation overall, but just to try to give some concept if you're watching along or trying to make a decision on a Friday night what to watch.
As I said before, not only is this my favorite comedy, it's one of my favorite movies. It is a good movie, and I think we all agree to that. And I think I'm probably reiterating in different words what you just said, but I think it's hilarious. As you see, I mean, I'm laughing at stuff, you know, that's tangential to some stuff you guys had said. And, you know, I think it's a near perfect film. I think it's just a great movie. And I love it, and I'll recommend it whether or not you like it or not. Not my problem. I'm going to fucking recommend this film till the day I die. So one.
Yeah, I mean, I really do like this movie. It's strange because like I have nostalgia for this movie, right? And like now, like obviously when I saw it when I was like 9 years old, I didn't have I didn't know the history of like 30s movies, but I think what I had was like I watched it with my parents. And I think they got those jokes at the time. And so like the things that were funny to them, I kind of like, you know, how you have that contagious laughter sometimes. I feel like a lot of the jokes of this movie were when I was that young were like transferred to me by that contagious laughter of my parents. You know, as time went on, I got more of the movie. I clearly didn't get it all when I saw it the first time, but enough of it's like funny slapstick where it can still be funny for you. But I get exactly what you mean. Like there are jokes about the original Universal Pictures Frankenstein. Like there are jokes about all kinds of, you know, weird references and things to these older movies, or, you know, the movie itself came out in 1974. So it's 40 years,
47,
almost
57 years old at right now. So like, you know, it's getting up there itself. And it's it holds up. I think it holds up really, really well. You're right. Like somebody watching it nowadays, you need a specific type of sense of humor, but I think I'm on your side, Chris. I will recommend this to most people, and if they don't like it, I'd be like, well, I tried. And
I did watch this movie solo. I feel like if you do watch this and you can get a crowd around it and like people get every joke, the infectious laughter idea of this, there's a certain thing about comedies that I think, hopefully everyone gets to go back to the theater soon enough. And I think comedies, especially, you remember it the way you saw it. And like, I pull for movies back in the day that I don't think probably if I watched solo, I remember going opening weekend to see Analyze This, and you don't think of Analyze This as the most funny movie ever. But I remember people were uproariously laughing. And I just, you have this appreciation where, Robert De Niro didn't do comedies all the time back then, and now he just does kind of like half schlock Meet the Parents garbage, right? And not to say that that's garbage, but even iterative from that this movie, I think would do well with like a family outing where everyone kind of can appreciate it too. And then you kind of could maybe get some of the jokes explained or whatever else, or just feel the laughter and like communal. And hopefully this is definitely a great communal movie. And that's the reason probably it made $90 million. People wanted to go to the theater and laugh with other people. That's the type of movies back then that made money and why they made these type of comedies. And they don't really make them as much now for that purpose. So
yeah. Absolutely. So unless anybody else has anything, we've got our scores. It's going to be 8s all around, right? And for the same reasons, I believe we all three took off a point for plot, and we all took off a point for antagonist, since kind of a lot of that went into the protagonist. So 8s all around, aggregate score of an 8. And I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good for our kickoff Mel Brooks film for the month of April. So we're going to sign off now. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Joe Soria.
Wasn't your hump on the other side?
And Christopher Morgan.
Taffeta.
What hump?
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?